welcome to week 6 from Linear to Circular webinar series for London cohort. And as you know, in this week we have double webinars. So there is another group talking about food, but in this particular webinar, we'll be speaking about fashion and why fashion is second most polluting industry in the world and how the circular vision could look like for this area. And today, my name is Ilma, by the way. I know that some of you have met me already. I was co-hosting the webinar last week. If not, my name is Ilma. I'm part of the learning team. And I'm joined by a co-host that I think needs no introduction because this is the person that has been behind from Linear to Circular programs. She's the one that has any answer to any question. She's the one that's there. If you need anything, she's the one that's making this program happen. So I'm very happy to have Anna co-hosting the session with me. Welcome, Anna.
Thanks,
Welcome.
Ilma. That's a lot of praise, and then you deserve it just as much. But thank you. Yeah, I am actually really excited to be your co-host today because, as Ilma said, normally I am the one that answers the question in the forum. So it's a nice change to be here today. And it's my first time also hosting for From Linear to Circular. So that's good. So before we go into it, actually, I now have the duty to make some quick but important announcements. So as you know, we have started this program with a bigger cohort for the online part of the program, and we will make our final selection at the end of this series. We've spoken about that briefly already, and you will shortly receive an email from us about this, explaining how we will go about the selection process. And just to be sure, we'll also post that message on LinkedIn and on Slack because we've noticed that some people haven't received our earlier emails. And I really just, again, want to set your mind at ease that your engagement in Slack during the webinar series in the chat box and on LinkedIn will not influence our final assessment, because we are all different people and we like to engage with each other in different ways, right? So what will influence our final assessment is a combination of your earlier application and an extra assignment that you will soon hear more about. And we really hope that you're enjoying the series so far and all that it has to offer. And we understand that it can be a bit overwhelming, but focus on what makes you learn best, on what makes you thrive.
And do we already know in which week we will share the assignment for the final selection?
Yes, we said week 8 before, but I think, Ilma, that we might be a little earlier than week 8, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So just to reiterate what Anna said, don't worry about your participation, get the most out of it, and then there will be a reflective creative assignment to do at your own pace, and you'll have plenty of time in order to, well, get ready for the next phase that may happen in the future. Right. So yes, what Anna was saying about, getting most out of it. So one of the ways we want to encourage your learning is homework assignments. And I've seen some really great discussions, or rather sharings, happening from your learning trios on the Slack community, reflecting on the policymakers and also plastic webinar that took place last week. So please continue doing that. Share from last week. It will be a similar homework for this week, and then we will have a larger reflection about what you've learned in these 4 topical webinars next week, so going forward. There's also great discussion happening on biomimicry on Monday Question Slack channel, so we also invite you to join that as well. And maybe just a reminder regarding Zoom, although I'm sure you'll pretty much know how to use it, but if you have any questions in regards to the content that you hear in the webinar today, please make sure to post it in the chat window. And I actually also encourage you to turn on your videos. There won't be that many of us, so it would be really nice to see each other. Yes, so fashion. Anna, do you think this is the time to introduce our 2 incredible guest speakers?
Yes, let's do that. So joining us today, we have 2 members of our Make Fashion Circular team, Marilyn Martinez and Matteo Magnani. And before we really kick off, Marilyn and Matteo, I wanted to ask you about your personal journey. What brought you to work for the Ellen MacArthur Foundation? Just give us a taste of that. And I'd like to start with you, Marilyn.
Hi everyone. I guess I came from the classic business school background. So I was straight from business school to my first job, which was strategy consulting. So no surprise there. And when I started working there, I realized that I had this preconceived idea that companies to succeed had to produce and sell more always. So that was my first job, started off like that. And then my very first project at that job was about assessing circular economy innovators or startups out of complete chance. And I didn't even know what the circular economy was at that point. So when I was assessing them, I realized that they were growing not by selling more, but by using more, and often doing it by enhancing their own systems and contexts and the places that they were working on. And that was it for me. Since then, I was like, okay, this is what I want to work on. And 2 years later, I made the move. So I've been with EMF now for 2 years, working on Make Fashion Circular, or almost 2 years. And yeah, trying to shift the industry.
So we almost started at the same time, I just realized from you, but we are growing quite quickly. So
Yeah.
after you joined, Matteo joined us as well. And Matteo, I'm curious if, when you first came into contact with circular economy and what your journey is.
Yeah, hi everyone. And let me say just, Anna, it's awesome to see all the smiling faces of all these beautiful people. So hi everyone, and really turn on the camera so we can see all of you. Then to answer your question, Anna, I joined the foundation in September last year, and I joined straight from uni. And the reason why I'm here and not in another place was that I had the beautiful opportunity to do my Master of Science thesis on the topic of pre-consumer waste in the fashion industry. So what we did was we went to interview several actors in the textile value chain, asking them basically what were their inefficiencies. It was not very easy to let them tell us this information, but we uncovered a lot of inefficiencies actually in the supply chain. Waste is happening indeed in every stage. So there is yarn waste, fabric waste, even finished garments waste. This was really interesting, especially when you looked at the efforts they put into recycling and reusing that type of waste into that production. But here it's where I really saw that it was not the only important thing to look at. It was maybe not even the most important thing to look at, because if you actually try to always find a solution for waste, you don't really address the root cause of the problem. And I saw in the circular economy framework a real opportunity to do so. I love, in fact, that what the first principle of the circular economy, which is really the difference between maybe what I did in my thesis and what I'm doing here, because we look at designing out waste rather than designing from waste.
Thank you, Matteo. And let's start the conversation by looking at the system as it is right now. And there are some incredible statistics that we have unveiled through our New Textiles report that was published a couple of years ago. And let's say one of these facts is that maybe just 1 second, Marilyn, before we do this.
Okay.
So one fact is that in the last 15 years, the production of clothing has doubled, while the utilization actually fell by 40%. So, just let that sink in. So 15 years before, we had half the clothing we have now, and yet we use them so much more less in today's world. And there's another particular statistic, and actually it's a bit of a quiz. So right now you should see the slide in the screen, and I want you to share your answers in the chat. So 1 truckload full of clothes gets landfilled every second, every hour, or every day. So let's see what answers start coming in. Second. It's A or B, so nobody thinks that it's every day. Marilyn, Matteo, would you like to make a few comments about this one and what is actually the correct answer?
Yeah, it is one truckload every second.
Yeah,
which means that actually, in terms of percentages, and I will explain that further, but over 70, I think it's over 70% of all the clothes that get produced go straight to landfill.
Yeah, it's what I mean. I saw the report, and at first, for some reason, I thought it can't be a second, it must be an hour, and yet it's actually every second. So, you know, if we were to calculate, since we started this Zoom call, how many minutes times 60, how many truckloads full of clothing has actually been landfilled already. And there's one more fact that I wanted to share. So the fact that a quarter of all chemicals produced in the world is actually used in the textile or fashion industry. What does that actually mean, Marilyn? Like a quarter of all chemicals, does that mean, do we mean it's polluting, it's toxic, it's hazardous?
I think Matteo can answer this one better, but it means that like the fashion industry is not, it basically uses a lot of man-made products. So it's not just reliant on like a specific crop or anything, but rather like a lot of man-made products. And I think like the use of chemicals has increased lately, as well as the amount of clothes produced, because they're used to like make the crops grow faster, for example. So if you go that back of the supply chain, or to increase the efficiency of some of the dyes and tinting throughout the manufacturing process of the actual garment. But I think, Matteo, you probably have more to say on that.
No, that's the main point, Marilyn. In a very simple way, I think the main outcome to get from that stat is that actually when we think about clothing, we tend to think about fibers. But in order to get the final fiber, we don't only need to grow fibers, either naturally, so by, for example, the way cotton is grown, or synthetically by the way polyester is manufactured, but we also need to process those fibers with some chemicals we usually are not aware of. And that amount is exactly a quarter of all the chemicals used in the world.
Thank you, Matteo. And very fittingly, I actually have a garbage truck just outside of my window, so it seems to be a bit noisy. So Marilyn, let's go back to the slide you were starting to share and tell us more about the current system of fashion.
Okay, so can you all see my slide now? Yeah, perfect. So I guess in 2017, we did this report called A New Textiles Economy, Redesigning Fashion's Future. And what we did there is we assessed the impact of the textiles flow currently. So that's like a linear flow of textiles. And we found this classic, we call it a trombone, which is like the flow of textiles in the linear industry. And even though these numbers are, well, I guess right now we're in 2020, so obviously this is not up to date precisely. However, the industry hasn't shifted yet from being linear to circular, so they're pretty much the same, especially when you think about it in percentage terms. So what it means is that right now, pretty much all of the materials that are used to make clothes are made out of virgin feedstock. And what that means is like they are either like plastic, cotton, like most of it, and then others 10%. But what that means is that they're used for the sole purpose of making these textiles. So they haven't been used before with anything else. They're virgin, so they're like straight out of the cotton field or straight out of like the oil to make the plastic. Then when making the clothes, there are about 12% of losses in production. That means that, you know, in the cutting floor when they're chopping up the textiles, or when like sewing, there's loads of like waste there in the manufacturing floors. Then clothes are used. However, what is important to point out is that in the last 15 years, clothing production has doubled, but clothing utilization has decreased by 40%, which is, I mean, it's monumental. Like how much less, I guess, we're wearing clothes right now. Then at that point, when people get rid of clothes, about 12%, well, 14% gets cascaded or collected to recycling. 2% get lost on the way because the system is not cohesive right now. Like every single country, city, blah, blah, recycles their own clothes in a different way. They've got a different process to recycle clothes. So because it's not coherent, then there are always some losses in the process. And then the 12% that actually gets recycled is actually what we call downcycling, or what is known as downcycling, meaning that it does not go back into clothes. It actually goes into mops to wipe the floor, or insulator materials that you put underneath the carpets or underneath the cars, like below the carpet of the cars. And yeah, so currently right now, which is the most shocking thing that I found this graph when I first saw it, is like only 1% of all the clothes that get recycled get put back into clothes. So when you think about, oh, I'm doing like a nice thing by taking these clothes to like a charity, and if it doesn't get sold, it will definitely be put back into clothes. That's a lie. Only 1% do. So I think for me that was like the most shocking thing when I read this graph for the first time. So obviously this shows the monumental size of the issue and where the industry is heading. So what's the solution? And Make Fashion Circular emerge out of this saying, okay, we know what are the pitfalls of the industry, and this needs to change. So what's our vision? So this is our current vision, which is that in a circular economy for fashion, clothes are used more, they're made to be made again, and they're made from safe and renewable materials. So this is our ultimate vision of what a circular fashion industry would look like and needs to have. And as Make Fashion Circular, we are working with a cohort of over 50 organizations from throughout the value chain to work towards that. So to increase the utilization of clothes, to increase the clothes that are actually made so that they can be put back into clothes, and increase that 1% that I was just talking about. And from safe and renewable materials, because going back to what Ilma said about the quarter of the chemicals that get used into clothes, they're not all safe. Actually, very few of them are safe. So how can we, safe for humans, like for us wearing them, but obviously also to the people that are actually making these clothes and being exposed to these chemicals when producing them. So how can we actually shift from that to safe and renewable materials that actually improve the soil in which they're being farmed, and not, I guess, diminish the health of anyone in the supply chain dealing with them.
Marilyn, just to interrupt you quickly, just to take it back a step. If we look at the three principles of the circular economy, and you compare those with the three elements that you just mentioned, you can really closely link them to one another, right? So if you look at the first principle, do you want to talk us through how these three principles link to each other?
Yes, yeah, that's a great point, Anna. Absolutely. So we based our vision for a circular fashion industry on the three principles of the circular economy. So clothes are used more. It links with products and materials are kept in use. Made to be made again. It's linked to sorry, I completely lost it right now. But it's products are worn more, made to be made again, and from safe and renewable materials. So from safe and renewable materials is like the circular economy is based on safe and renewable materials. And made to be made again. What's the principle, Mateo, on that one?
Yeah.
Waste and pollution. Oh, sorry.
Actually, there is a correspondence, but I agree with Marilyn. It's not exactly an identity between the three principles of circular economy and the three principles of circular fashion. So, I mean, we make the association, but actually, we believe that the way we structured our three ones is a bit more self-explanatory, but very roughly, the first one, clothes are used more, is clothes is kept in use for as long as possible. Made to be made again would be related to designing out waste. So we make sure there is no waste because clothing is made into new clothing. And regenerate natural system is the renewable materials bit of the vision, but we had to explode it because for fashion, it is a bit more complex. So for safe and renewable materials, we mean a lot of different things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
By renewable and safe, so by renewable, we mean that it can be continuously replenished, right? It's not like just one time used. And by safe, that it's not hazardous, non-toxic to the environment, just to clarify. Yeah.
And the made to be made again, it links to the design of waste and pollution, because it's about how do you keep materials, products and materials, like, so that they never become waste. So you make them to be made again. So that deals with the fact that whatever you're making, it needs to be, you know, well, first of all, kept in use. That's what clothes are used more. But then if you know, whenever you cannot use them more, it's like, how can you make them easily recyclable or remanufactured?
okay, yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to, that's really useful to know. I wanted to move on to some examples, because we've now looked at the material flows. That was really interesting. And we've looked at the amount of work that we still need to do. We've looked at the vision. And, you know, we also know that selling more garments is not the only way for a company to make profit. So somebody in the chat just mentioned that there was 52 seasons, or some companies like have 52 seasons in one season, something. Basically, they sell a lot of clothes.
Yeah. Yeah, every week there is a new fashion season. That's what fast fashion is trying to do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I can't even wrap my head around that. But so you just explained that that part of the vision is that clothes should be used more, right? So could you give us an example of a company that aims for increased utilization of products?
Yes, ThreadUp. So ThreadUp is, they call themselves a managed marketplace, and they're based in the US. And what they do is, like, any of us can send to them for free all of our unwanted clothes. So we send them straight to them. They sort them up for you, and then they list them up for you. And then the users, or me, I can get between 30 to 80% of what my clothes are being sold for. So for having like a hassle-free, you know, like hassle-free solution for me to like sell my clothes, that's quite a bit of money, and also depending on obviously the value that you've got on your clothes already. But what is more interesting about ThreadUp right now is that it started like being a managed marketplace, so B2C model, like to customers, to users. And now it has also included this resell as a service model within their own solution, meaning that they're using their platform and their knowledge to actually increase the amount of times that clothes are worn by offering their service to different businesses. So now, for example, you can partner, if you are a retailer, you can partner with ThreadUp and have loyalty programs, or even have them like have them sort your clothes only as a retailer. And have a pop-up store in your physical store of like just vintage items. So there are several options that they are partnering with different people to increase this use. So they are a great solution that are increasingly looking into ways that people can increase their use. And obviously it creates like an indirect incentive for people like us to start taking care of their clothes better, and also thinking twice about what to buy, because the better quality and clothes that you send, the more money you get. So it's like an indirect incentive for you to like think about, if you are a regular user of a platform, saying, actually, if I you know, like take care of this better, then I can sell it for a couple of pounds extra. So it's great as well from that point of view.
And Marilyn, so I've been just looking at the chat, and there's quite a bit of discussion happening about the donation of the clothes. And so have we done any more research regards to the secondary markets of clothing, and let's say the entire donation aspect? Is this one of the good strategies you would consider for extending utilization of the clothing?
Yeah, donations are really interesting. They're great in terms of sorting clothes. So they work a lot with recyclers, for example. Whatever they cannot buy, they send it. They can sort it to the recyclers straight. to be recycled. So at least you have like a kind of like, you know that the clothes are not going straight to landfill, let's say, because they've got like a great process like that. But what is the question specifically about donations? If it's like good or bad, or like what is it?
Well, I think the discussion in the chat was more whether it could be considered as a viable option, given that I think there was here it is, the carbon, so they used the fact that the carbon emissions could be reduced by up to 30% if we extend the life of the clothes by 9 months. Meaning that if we donated the clothes and they actually got used for longer, then we would eventually lead to the reduction of CO2 emissions. So they were just wondering whether we have more statistics or more information about the impact of donating clothes. I think that was the question.
Yeah, it is great because the clothes do get sorted, and then from the point of view of extending the life of the garment, then whichever way you extend it, you will have this reduction in CO2 emissions. It doesn't have to be just by donating. It can also be by reselling or even by subscription, as long as you're extending the life of a garment. So in terms of like facts, what I know is that donations have increased in the last couple of years a lot, and that's a result of the increased production and supply of clothes, and people getting bored of their clothes more often and more frequently. But in terms of like hard facts, right now I don't have like at the top of my head.
Can I comment on this?
Yeah, of course, please, Mateo.
I wanted to make a point on the fact that actually donations are probably something we would want to phase away in the long term, because they don't really emphasize the value that is into the clothing. So actually, by the opportunities such as ThreadUp, but many more examples can be made, actually we can see that clothing has a lot of value. So actually by donating it, we completely neglect all the value that is into the clothing. So for example, if we had a fashion industry as the one we are envisioning, so where clothing is made to be made again, then those clothing would not be donated, would be probably sold to the manufacturer. For example, the t-shirt I'm wearing right now is from a company that actually gives you money when you return it. So it would be actually a big waste to just donate it, considering that I purchased it maybe for maybe £20 and I can get £5 when I return it. So in a fashion industry that is really circular, probably we would not donate clothing, but just get some money for them.
We will recover the embedded value of the clothes. I think that's the whole purpose of the circular economy. Like what is the embedded value of the clothes, and how can businesses extract the most of it, and as well as customers, how can you make the most of your clothes? So yeah. So right now it's hard to say like the impact that a circular economy will have in donations, but I know that in the last couple of years, the amount of clothes that has gone to donation has increased. So we definitely need to work on the use more area of our vision a lot, so that these clothes are actually kept in circulation.
So we've talked about how to increase the utilization of the clothes and how companies can tap into these value creation opportunities and invent new business models in fashion to make sure that these clothes are utilized for longer. So what about clothes that are made to be remade? Like, do we have examples of this aspect of the circular vision already happening in the market?
Yeah, Emma, we do have examples. Indeed, this is the one that we very much like, from an Italian company called Napapijri. It's an outdoor company. And what they recently made was this jacket called Infinity. So they asked themselves, what's the way we can make a jacket recyclable? Actually, there is not a single answer to this, but one of the answers is, well, by making it out of one single material. So they started to think about how can we make a jacket out of a single material? Well, it's quite an interesting design process, because they had to rethink every single component of the jacket, from the fabric to the trims, to the zippers, to the padding, to the linings. Everything has to be made from one single material. The material was specifically nylon 6, And the very interesting thing is that the company also partnered with a recycler that was already able from the outset to take that jacket in. So you know that after purchasing the jacket, after wearing it out, after even multiple uses, because what Marilyn said stays the most important thing, using clothing more. After all of that, the jacket can simply be taken, put into a machine, and the machine can give you new yarn that can be used in a new jacket.
I love hearing. I love hearing about all these examples, actually. And I just have to mention that we have many more in our case studies on the EMF website. And also Elodie and Clémence are posting some of them right now. So if we go on to the next one, so the third element of the vision that we spoke about, the safe and renewable materials, is there an example that you can give us? So you know that a garment made of natural organic fibers is not necessarily automatically safe and healthy, right? Matteo, would you like to?
Yeah, exactly, Anna. So I guess the example that Marilyn is showing is the right one for what you just laid out. Actually, the Lenzing with this product called Tencel makes fibers out from wood. And one might think, actually, if it's from wood, then it's natural, it's good. Well, first of all, you've got the issue of how you source the wood. You need to make sure that the rate you take the wood, which is at least equal, but it should be actually lower than the rate of replenishment of the forest. So first of all, Lenzing makes sure that this is respected. But most importantly, Lenzing with this Tencel product make sure that all the process needed to go from wood to a fiber doesn't really release any harmful substances into the environment. In fact, they recycle around 98 to 99, I don't remember the exact number, of all the solvents and chemicals involved into this process. So this is really like a best practice that is available in the industry right now.
Thank you. And just to be clear, I mean, there was a question about durability. These are really strong products, right? What you're wearing, I have that T-shirt as well. That's a pretty solid garment that you're wearing.
Yeah, I mean, what's the question? If all these things prevent garments from being durable, is that the question?
Yeah, especially the question was regarding the recycled fiber and whether it is as durable as, let's say, the new fiber, the virgin fiber.
Yeah.
And I think it was in relation to the jacket that you were mentioning before, but maybe generally, what would you say is the quality of the fiber made of recycled input the same as made of the virgin input?
Well, I'd say it depends on the type of recycling. I mean, in general, there are opportunities to make the new fiber, the new garment, really highly durable. For example, the T-shirt I'm wearing was made as durable as a virgin one by using only 50% of recycled material, and the other 50% was organic cotton. In this way, they were able to achieve the same performance as a virgin one. For the Napapieri jacket, it is possible to have instead 100% recycled input, recycled material with a high quality, because actually the process is a chemical recycling process. So the chemical recycling process is a bit more energy intensive. It requires a bit more energy, and actually what you get out from it. So the trade-off is that actually the quality of the output is virgin equivalent. So you don't even have this compromise. If you want to add anything, Marilyn.
Yeah, exactly. I think what is important to note is that you can really achieve quality, like really high quality products, regardless of the material that you're using, as long as you match the input with the recycling technology. So for example, in cotton, when talking about cotton's quality does decrease throughout every time that you recycle it. So, but however, you can adapt the recycling process by mechanically recycling, so that the cotton strains, I'm going really into details, don't get too strained, so that the quality is maintained. So you need to make it, basically, if you make it slower, then it works. And on top of that, if you mix it with like organic cotton for like even, you know, like 5%, you can go really low now if you adapt the process. But if the process is not adapted, then you have to kind of like up the amount of organic cotton on that. And then the other option, if you go through like a monomaterial, like Matteo was talking about the jacket, then you can, and obviously it's like a monomaterial out of man-made like plastic, it's nylon, I mean. And with that, you have a different type of recycling that can actually make you go to like the same input that you had at the beginning, because they have adapted the product to be 100%, like everything in that jacket, from the zips to everything, you can just put into the recycling and it comes out as new. So they have really designed that product to be made to be remade. So I think quality is not an issue as long as you consider like the process, like the recycling process, and the actual design from the beginning.
Thanks.
So there,
go ahead.
I just want to a quick question as we're talking about recycling. So Anna is asking about the latest statistics in terms of recycling the textiles globally. So in the report, we said that only 2% get effectively recycled. Do we have any updated stats? Is this what it is in the world today as well?
It's
well, there's a
1%.
report. Yeah.
It's still 1% put back into clothes.
1%, yeah. It's not even
Yeah.
2%. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, on to you, Anna.
All right, thank you. So Matteo, I wanted to ask you the next question. So we have spoken about some of the problems in the fashion industry, and we have looked at the material flows. We have addressed these problems by speaking about the vision and given some really exciting examples, actually. And I know you could give so many more examples. But we would love to hear some of the examples of things that you are working on. So can you share some of the team's initiatives which actually help to bring this vision alive?
Of course, Anna. So we did two major initiatives in 2019. The first one was called #WearNext. And this is sort of not something we used to do at the foundation because it's an initiative more focused on customers and customers' behavior, whereas at the foundation we usually look at how to change the system so that customer can play an appropriate role. Actually, what we did
Matteo, can I just pause you and ask you to elaborate a bit more why we stay away or steer clear from trying to change the consumer behavior, because we usually get a lot of questions regarding that.
Yeah, it's an important question. Why do we do that? Actually, nowadays, it's always the chicken and egg principle. Who is going to do things first? Actually, as the foundation, we are working with businesses, with governments, with academia in order to change something from the outset, in order for customers potentially not to even have the choice to make a wrong decision. Ideally, in our future, every decision would be a right decision in terms of purchasing decision, and this is what we believe exactly will change will shift the economy from linear to circular.
In other words, our choices are limited by the system itself, and therefore we choose to change the system so that then consumers can make the easier right choices, or that any choice they make is by default the right choice.
Exactly, you explained it perfectly. So yeah, to just still, I mean, what we acknowledge though is that the fashion industry has something which is peculiar. We need to look at industries in a way which is industry specific. That's why we've got systemic initiatives. And what's really specific about clothing and fashion is that the average consumer really looks at their clothing as if they are rubbish, as if they are something completely disposable. So this is the reason why we did this one initiative on consumer behavior. And so the objective was to actually make consumers aware that clothing are not rubbish, and there is a different stream for those clothes to go. This is why we actually set up this communications campaign in the city of New York by partnering with the city of New York, as well as brand recyclers and sorters, in order to actually fill the city as well as social media with information on where you can actually bring your clothing that you are not capable of using anymore because maybe it's worn out. So you were able to actually see on a map where you could do that, where you could return your clothing in some collection points, which were like around 1,100 all around the city of New York. And we kept this project open for around 3 months, and we were very happy to see the result at the end, because compared to the previous year, actually the amount of clothes collected were 60, I think, 1,000 tons more than the previous year. So this was quite a success for us.
And where was the question? There was a question, what happens in the meantime, from Carlos, while we get to the point in which any choice is the correct one? A lot of time will pass. Why can't we work on changing consumer behavior? And I guess it's worth mentioning that there are a lot of organizations out there working on that, but we all do what we do best, and we work with systemic change, and then there are others that work on consumer behavior.
Yes, of course. I mean, we need to, of course, push on both sides. We are good at pushing at the systemic change, and we still believe that consumers have a voice and have a power to let's say influence the system by their choices. That's why we are speaking about examples, because out there you can see circular economy already. And for example, what I do is now every time I buy a t-shirt, I always look whether the content is organic, whether maybe there's some recycled content into it. So this is very, very important.
So talking about the way we do work with companies, tell us about the next initiative that we have currently running, the jeans redesign.
Of course. So the jeans redesign exactly is some initiatives we made with companies on an attempt to make them start producing some circular jeans. We chose jeans because we believe that jeans are very relatable. Everybody sort of has a pair of jeans, and most of the biggest companies actually have a line of jeans that they're producing. So this is why we chose jeans. And we created some guidelines on how these companies could have produced their first batch of circular jeans. So what we got was now 50 signatories. So the logos you see now on the slides are brands, brand manufacturers and fabric mills that actually said, we are able to do jeans according to the guidelines, and we will put in the market more than 600,000 of those type of jeans, compliant jeans, by May 2021. So this is pretty successful, because actually at the beginning we had only 16 signatories, and we increased the signatories to 50, which was very good for us. And let me know if you want to know more about the what are the highlights of the guidelines. I don't know if that's of interest.
And there are a lot of big brands that have signed up to the jeans redesign. So just by when do you say, by when do we expect to see some of the circular jeans, let's say, being
all of them committed to do that by May 2021. Some of them might do it earlier, but that's the sort of deadline we made as a commitment, because of course they need time to design the jeans, to do the prototypes, and they might have different timelines, but that's the deadline, May 2021. So in a year, basically. In a
year's time, we'll have some circular jeans. That's incredible. And the guidelines, are they easily accessible online? Can we share them afterwards?
Sure. Yeah, we will put the guidelines on the Slack group or whatever we are using with this group of people. We will share them.
I just wanted to put that also, because this afternoon I briefly spoke to Chiara, who is our colleague from Make Fashion Circular, who works on the jeans redesign project. And I asked her, so how many people are we actually talking about? How many people actually wear jeans on a day-to-day basis? And because this was something that was addressed in another webinar. Somebody said, well, I never wear jeans. I thought, I do wear jeans quite a bit. And she said, we don't have stats we don't have worldwide stats. And of course it's different in different parts of the world. But if you look, for example, at the US, she said that more than half, 52% of the US adult populations wear jeans 4 or more days a week. and then including 22% who wear jeans every day. And then she said another staggering stat, good alliteration there. She said also around 7.5 billion feet of denim fabric is produced every year. That she says, again, according to another stat, that's about 6 billion pairs of jeans every year. So
yeah,
so that's basically a pair per person. Like 80% of population could get a new pair every year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is incredible indeed. So talking about, again, the companies that we work with, and it's quite common to receive the questions of a similar line, but wait, let me find. So there was some, so the question was about the commitments of the companies to really become more circular and whether we trust their commitments and whether, so here's the question, are brands who claim to work on sustainable goals like H&M to be trusted on their claims? And then there was a comment related to that, that yes, H&M has a team dedicated to circularity, but the current business model is the exact opposite of sustainable. So why do we choose to work with, let's say, fast fashion brands generally? And yeah, what do we expect out of them, and can their claims be trusted?
Tell me to take that one, Matteo.
You want to take it? Go for it.
Yeah, I can take it. So
Yeah.
I've been involved since the beginning of Make Fashion Circular. Well, the early days, I guess, a bit before Matteo. So I know like the recruitment process and why we took the brands that we took. We wanted to be as representative as possible of the entire value chain, so that we can effectively create systemic change. And that means including fast fashion brands like H&M and Inditex, because they hold the biggest volume on clothes being produced and sold. So if we were to exclude them, we cannot effectively make change. So they were key for us, actually. And yes, H&M, it is known for their fast fashion model, but right now I think that the term that we use, fast fashion, has been diluted, and it actually is a bit, it doesn't mean what it, people use it to mean, I guess, like ephemeral clothes and fast fashion clothes, but actually the term emerged out of the time that it takes from design to the time that it takes from this piece of clothes to be designed and then put in the retailer store. So it became a fast model and a fast fashion model when everyone started shifting from, you know, like these seasons, like now there are more seasons than there were before. There were only 2 seasons, and now we've got like, I don't know how many, like over 20 seasons, I think, in some areas. So they all follow. Doesn't matter right now if you're a luxury brand or like a fast fashion brand, your model is fast, because you from the time that it takes you to design to put a material into store, it usually takes less than 3 weeks. Across the entire industry. So this fast fashion dilemma is actually applied throughout the industry. It's not just H&M, even though they have that reputation. So it's everyone pretty much that is following this model. And then finally, everyone that has joined either the Jeans Redesign and Make Fashion Circular is because they've got internal stakeholders. So there are people inside there that are working to make a difference, and they are willing to invest resources to make change happen. What is true, and that's across industries, not just in the fashion industry, is that bigger companies like H&M and Inditex and other big ones, any big company, let's say, in an industry, to change it's harder than when you're an innovator and a startup. And that's, you know, it's because of ways of working, I don't know, like legacy systems and so on. So it is harder to change, but it doesn't mean that they're working on it. So yeah, that's our position.
So in a way, we do trust their claims to become circular.
Yeah, I mean, they have to start somewhere, right? And by making these claims, they are literally working internally to try to meet them. So they have to, and once they say something publicly, they know that they have to make it happen, because otherwise they get like a whole backlash. So yeah, that's their way of working. And sometimes there are teams that internally really work hard to say something publicly, so that they can gather more internal people behind them and make this change happen. So that's how it works.
So talking about how they make the change happen. So there were a couple of questions that we received from Slack regarding the circular design and how that gets applied for clothes. And there were a couple of questions that in a way relate to the dilemma that we have discussed before as well, which is designing from waste versus designing out waste and pollution. So our principle is the fact that we should design out any waste and any pollution from the get-go.
Yeah.
Yes. I lost the slides and I'm like, did I just leave the webinar? Right. No. So and yet on the other hand, while we do need to think about how to redesign the system of fashion and how to make the clothes circular from the very point of design, what about all the clothes already out there? What do we do with them? How can we still keep the value that they have? So how does the circular design from old clothes and designing out, the fast fashion play out in this industry?
Yeah, that's a great point actually. And we see our vision for the circular fashion industry as a very much long-term vision, and that's where we're trying to gather traction and push people towards. So that's the ultimate aim. However, we understand that right now there are loads of clothes that already exist and that need solving. So how we are phrasing it is like, from any clothes that you're going to produce from this point onwards, you need to design it following circular design principles, circular design methodology and principles and thinking, meaning that you need to have the three circular economy principles in mind, and apply this kind of like concept, be aware of the problem and be aware of the solution, which is a circular economy, and apply these principles in mind in whatever you are designing. And that means being aware as well about your system and where you're operating. In regards to the clothes that are already there, so the first one is you need to start thinking about making the most of the product. So if you're designing, you need to make the most of the product. If that's not available anymore, so if you cannot make the most of the product, is how can you make the most of the material that the product is made? So for example, if you have a pair of jeans that has like stains and holes, instead of like putting it straight to recycling, you go like, wait, actually I can make a pair of shorts out of this. So you just chop it up and still salvage, half of that jean to like make something new. And then finally, if nothing can be recovered, it's like, how can you work towards recycling that so that it's made to be made again? So you make it into fiber again and extend the life of the fiber in the best possible way. So you have to go through that three things. In the short term, so I think it's like working into things in parallel. So from now onwards, whatever people are creating, we're pushing to the circular design process to be in place. And at the same time, acknowledging the fact that they're already clothes out there. So you need to make the most of them, you need to revalue them. And I think in the short term, that's going to be very much kind of like the biggest volume is of what we've got. But in the long term, it's like getting the balance right, trying to revalue clothes while not producing what doesn't get used the most or what doesn't fit in a circular economy.
Marilyn, just thank you for that. Just to I see we only have a few minutes left. I wanted to ask a question that quite a few people have asked in one way or another. Somebody just mentioned look at the ethical side of looking at the ethical side of it. And before the webinar, Liana asked, is there anyone working on the implications that a circular economy would have on the current garment sector in developing countries? For example, a circular economy creates opportunities, but what might these be for women in Bangladesh? And I know that you have been actually have been to quite a few of these countries as a team to look into this situation. So could you share something about that with us?
Yeah, so last year when we could all still travel, we did a tour we actually visited manufacturing facilities in China, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka to see it live, because working from the Isle of Wight, sometimes it's obviously harder to picture what is it, and it's so eye-opening when you actually see it for the first time. And we talked about all of that, and we saw it on the like first hand. So we know, in particularly now with the COVID situation, like how countries in the developing world can be impacted by it. And we see in terms of like the actual facts and implications, that's the biggest gap that we've seen in terms of like people working on it. Not that many people are working on the, or trying to find these facts about the social aspect, but from a Make Fashion Circular and I think EMF position, we know and we always talk about the circular economy being distributed, diverse and inclusive. So that means that any forms of wealth and value will be distributed throughout the supply chain, and that the collaborations will start happening between big companies, small companies, artisans, and everyone, like a really diverse range of collaboration will start happening so that more people will be involved in this circular economy. And that will result in distributing the amount of wealth throughout the supply chain and not just, you know, being it all upstream, which is what it is currently. So it is about distributing this wealth throughout the supply chain and not just at the end of it. I don't know if you have anything else to say.
Yeah, but no, it's so, I mean, we can talk about this forever, right? And you can also see that in the chat actually right now, because it's such an important topic to address. But we have reached the end of the webinar, so we have a few more questions, and an important one is, what are the next steps actually? What are you working on right now? What does the future look like?
Yeah, you can go with it.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly on my side, as me and Marilyn are working on two, let's say, different pieces of MFC, and just to follow up from what I said about jeans, with jeans, we are basically telling the industry how to make circular jeans. Very briefly, what we are trying to do next is to try to tell the industry how to make all products circular. So how that will look like is still confidential. We're still trying to figure it out, but we are very much working hard on it. So that's on my side, the next steps, and Marilyn has a lot of other interesting stuff.
Yeah, Marilyn, just if you could keep it brief, and also to Carlo in the chat asks, how can we help? So that might be a good one too.
Yeah, that's great actually, because it leads directly to what I'm about to say. So I've been working on two different things. So Matteo has been working on the technical side, and I've been working on translating that into like a format and thinking process, so that any creative in the industry can understand what circular design is and means for the fashion industry, and how can they start applying it. Before they start applying it, so that they can apply it effectively once they get there. That's the whole point. And in terms of how can you help, is just knowing what a circular economy for fashion means, and the principles that you need to apply in your thinking is a great starting point. And hopefully we're going to publish this soon, so that people can get involved and people can start sharing the message. And at the same time, we're also working on new business models. So that's investigating a piece on circular business models and why they're key to transition towards circular economy. Because we all know that we need to, I mean, the first part of our vision is increase the amount of times that clothes are worn, and that goes above recycling, because we cannot recycle our way out of the problem. We really need to increase use. So why is that more important, and what's the size of the price, and how can people start understanding the different approaches that you can take to reuse clothes, so that more people start testing these new models in the industry. So if you're an entrepreneur, that piece is also going to be very helpful for you, and you can get involved in that way.
So thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Matteo. It has been great to have you in the webinar with us today. And just to say that, yes, we're wrapping up, and the homework for this week is the same as last week. So we ask you to go back with your learning trios and reflect on today's webinar, fashion and food, share what you have learned, and then share your reflections back on Slack. And next week, we will be talking about the most comprehensive circular economy measuring tool for companies, Circulytics. And I may be back with you. I'm not sure, actually. I don't remember who's hosting the next one. But if you'd like, we have the final challenge for you. Who's up for 30-second challenge and would like to come and speak? Anyone from participants? 30 seconds challenge?
It's fun.
It's fun. It's nothing you haven't heard about today.
What about Carlos? Just briefly saw you raise your hand. Yeah, there he is.
Carlos. Okay, great. Carlos, come on camera. Or actually, you're on camera. Come on the microphone, unmute yourself. And here's the question for you. So in 30 seconds, what are you taking away from this webinar?
Well, at the beginning of it, I was concerned that the consumer behavior was not being touched, but I understand the focus of EMF and how EMF is working on their side, on the systemic part and on business. And of course, there is a side of policymakers. But in terms of the consumer behavior, clearly there's a work that we need to do on our side. We consumers need to do on our side. Is that the time? Yeah, that was it. 30 seconds.
Thank you. Great. Thank you. Great summary. And thank you, everyone. And we'll see you all next week.